He told me women like me don't come upstairs, so I went upstairs, and I hit play on the video that destroyed everything. He looked at me in front of 200 guests and said it with that smile, the smile of a man who has never once heard the word no. Women like you don't come up here. I looked down, I handed him the champagne flute, and I walked back down those stairs thinking, that's fine. Because I knew exactly what was saved on that flash drive inside my apron pocket. My hand didn't shake, my face didn't change. I learned a long time ago how to hold your body still when your soul is screaming. But something inside me, in that exact moment, stopped asking permission, stopped looking down, stopped accepting. And Dr. Marcus Hargrove, prominent cardiologist, charity gala fixture, man whose name was on a hospital wing in Buckhead, had absolutely no idea what I was carrying in that pocket. He had no idea what I had seen, what I had kept, what I was about to do. Because people who treat invisible women like me tend to forget one thing: we still have eyes. And I saw everything. Every dollar, every document, every lie wrapped in letterhead with his name embossed in gold. If someone has ever made you feel like you didn't belong somewhere because of what you have or what you don't have, tell me in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is for you. And it isn't over yet. Let me take you back to the beginning, so you can understand how that penthouse in Buckhead, that party with 200 guests and crystal stemware and jumbo shrimp on ice, became the place where my life turned upside down. And then finally, permanently, right side up. I was 31 years old when I drove into Atlanta for the first time with a hatchback packed full, and my cousin Tamara's phone number saved in my contacts. She'd been living in Decatur for 3 years and said she could get me a room at her friend's place until I found my footing. I came from Macon, 2 hours south, not running from anything. I want to be clear about that. I came with a plan. I've always had a plan. Back in Macon, I'd finished high school with honors and spent 6 years working my way up at a property management company downtown. Started as a receptionist, ended as the office coordinator who kept everything running. I knew how to manage schedules, handle vendor contracts, track budgets, organize events for property owners. My supervisor used to say I was the glue of this office because nothing fell through the cracks when I was paying attention. That was just how my brain worked. I liked things in their right place. I came to Atlanta because Macon had given me everything it had to give. The opportunities weren't going to grow there, but my ambitions were. I wanted to take a professional certificate program in event management. I'd already researched it, picked the program at a school in Midtown, knew exactly what the tuition cost. $4,200 per semester. I needed to work a year to stack enough money and still have a cushion. Tamara got me a room in a 3-bedroom house her friend rented out in East Atlanta Village. Small room, no closet, $750 a month. I fit in there with my 2 suitcases and a goal. It was enough. Work came fast. I catered 2 events through a staffing agency in Buckhead. Then I worked as a house cleaner for a service that operated across the northern suburbs. Then, through a woman at my church who knew a woman who knew a woman, I got an interview for a household manager position with a family in Buckhead. Stayed there 9 months. Good people, treated me right, paid on time. When they relocated to London for the husband's firm, they wrote me a letter of recommendation and wished me well. That letter was what Diana Hargrove read, seated in a cream leather chair in the living room of the penthouse on West Paces Ferry Road, glasses at the end of her nose, expression like she was evaluating a piece of furniture for resale. The interview lasted 40 minutes. She talked 35. I answered 5. She explained the role: household manager, responsible for the household calendar, private event coordination, vendor management, and overseeing the 2 staff members already employed there. Salary: $58,000 a year, W-2, health insurance, paid time off. I needed that job. I accepted. But before she let me go, she said something I didn't forget. She folded my letter of recommendation and placed it on the marble coffee table and said, with the voice of someone doing you an enormous favor, "You seem organized. But things work a specific way here. We keep things separate." I didn't ask her what she meant. I understood. The penthouse was on the 14th floor of a building on West Paces Ferry Road in Buckhead. 2 floors. The lower level had the kitchen, the service hallway, a staff room, and a smaller sitting area for vendor meetings and deliveries. The upper level, what I learned to call their floor, was the main living room, the primary suite, Dr. Hargrove's home office, the rooftop terrace with the view of the city, the wine cellar, the home theater. My work was on the lower level. I was allowed on the upper level to clean, to serve, to set up, but never to stay, never to sit, never without being called. I learned that the second day, when I sat down at the kitchen island on the upper level to draft a grocery order, Diana appeared without warning, looked at me sitting there and said, "You don't work sitting down." Not with anger, worse, with total indifference. Like I'd sat in a spot that was obviously not mine, and she was correcting me the way you'd correct a child who hadn't read the room. I stood up, went downstairs, finished the list, standing at the service counter. It was things like that, my meals eaten separately in the staff kitchen while the Hargroves dined upstairs, the broken HVAC unit in the service hallway that I'd put in 3 maintenance requests for over 2 months, the old phone Diana gave me for work communication, unlocked, prepaid, so she could pull messages whenever she wanted, the camera installed in the hallway outside my storage closet, pointing directly at the door where I kept my personal belongings. "Just for security," she said. But I needed the job. My mother had been dealing with a health issue back in Macon, a kidney condition that required ongoing treatment. Her Medicare supplement wasn't fully covering. I was sending her $800 a month. Not much was left over. The event management certificate had been pushed to the back burner. I kept going. Every day I kept going. And every day I stored a little more somewhere inside me that I didn't have a name for yet. The party that destroyed everything and saved everything. I had planned myself over the course of 3 weeks. Black tie charity gala, 200 guests. The theme was Hearts That Give, because Dr. Marcus Hargrove was the named patron of a pediatric cardiac foundation serving low-income children across rural Georgia. The irony of that name didn't become complete to me until later. I organized every single detail. The florist, white orchid and eucalyptus centerpieces. The caterer, an upscale firm from Virginia Highland with a 7-course tasting menu. The guest list, 208 names, each with dietary restrictions noted in a spreadsheet I built from scratch. The sound system, the valet service, the coat check, the server uniforms, the crystal glassware rental, the lighting design, the photographer, the elevator access protocol for VIP arrivals. 3 weeks, 17 working days. I fell asleep thinking about logistics and woke up checking my lists. The night of the event, I was in my staff uniform. Black slacks, white button-down, discreet apron, moving between both levels to make sure everything was running right. This was my event. I knew every detail of that party better than anyone else in that building. It was around 10 o'clock when Dr. Hargrove called me over with a gesture, the gesture of a man calling someone who has a function but not a name, 2 fingers bent in your direction. He was standing at the top of the staircase connecting the 2 levels, mid-conversation with 3 men in dark suits. Important men. The kind of men who laugh at everything the host says. I came up the stairs with a tray of champagne flutes. He looked at me, then looked at the other 3 men the way someone does when they're setting up a punchline, only they're going to find funny, and said, with the usual smile, the magazine cover smile, the smile of a man who has never once been told no. "Women like you don't come up here," and he pointed down. It wasn't a shout. It was worse. It was casual. It was the kind of thing said like it was self-evident, like I'd wandered somewhere by mistake, and he was helpfully redirecting me. The 3 men around him smiled. One of them looked away. Another reached past me and picked a flute off the tray without making eye contact. I felt the floor disappear beneath me, but my face didn't show it. I learned that a long time ago. When you can't react, you control your face. It's the only real estate that still belongs to you. I looked down. I set the tray on the side table at the top of the stairs. I walked back down. I went into the staff kitchen. I stood with my back to the door for about 30 seconds with my palm flat on the cold marble of the counter. And on that cold marble, I made a decision. Not tonight, I thought. Not like this. But one day. One day I'm going up to that floor. And it's going to be him that can't make me leave. That night wasn't the first humiliation. It was just the one I chose not to let go of. I had understood for a while that none of it was accidental. It was a system. It was how that family operated with anyone who depended on them to pay rent. Rhonda told me her story the week after I started. I ran into her outside the building on a Saturday morning. She'd come back to retrieve a sweater she'd left. and Diana had told the front desk to let her up to the lobby. We rode the service elevator down together. That was where we actually started talking. Rhonda had cleaned for the Hargroves twice a week for 2 years. 2 years of every Tuesday and Friday, of spotless floors and ironed linens and scrubbed grout. When she asked to be properly classified as an employee, not an independent contractor, because under IRS guidelines the relationship clearly qualified, Diana told her it wasn't possible because she was self-employed. I told her that 2 years, twice a week, same house, same hours, that's an employment relationship, Rhonda told me, in that voice of someone who has repeated the story many times but never to someone who could do anything about it. I said I'd read about it, that the IRS test for, and she looked at me like I'd said something ridiculous, like I just didn't understand how things worked. Rhonda crossed her arms, said if I had a problem with the arrangement, she'd need to explore other options. Did you go after what you were owed? Rhonda looked at me with an expression I didn't forget. It was exhaustion. It was resignation. It was the face of a woman who had run the math and concluded that the cost of fighting was higher than the cost of losing. Vanessa, I needed my next job. If I made noise, she was going to talk. In Buckhead, in that circle, everybody knows everybody. I'd already seen what she did to somebody else. But she owed you 2 years. No Social Security contributions handled correctly. No unemployment eligibility built up. Nothing when she let me go. Just stop texting me to come in. Rhonda looked at the floor. I needed a reference, so I swallowed it. I sat beside her on the bench outside the building lobby for a few minutes, not saying anything, thinking about how many Rhondas that family had left behind. How many women who swallowed it because they needed the reference, because the cost of fighting seemed impossibly high, because no one had ever told them there was a law on their side. Then I learned about Jasmine, the nanny who'd been there before me. Diana had told someone in their social circle that Jasmine was unreliable with the children. No specifics, no incident, just that phrase, dropped into conversation, traveling from one dinner table to the next until Jasmine couldn't get a household position in Buckhead for nearly 7 months. Jasmine had 2 kids. Those 7 months were financed on credit cards. When she told me about it months later over the phone, she spoke with a calm that was sadder than any crying. I still don't understand what I did wrong. She didn't do anything wrong. That was the answer I wanted to give her in that moment, but that I was still figuring out for myself. Then I learned about Monica, the cook. Monica had badly cut her hand on a mandolin in the upstairs kitchen. 6 stitches at Piedmont, Atlanta. Dr. Hargrove said he'd cover the emergency room bill. He never did. $1,200 Monica paid out of pocket because she didn't have her own insurance. When she came back and asked about filing a workers' compensation claim, Diana told her it didn't really apply because the mandolin was standard kitchen equipment, and Monica should be more careful. Monica left 3 months later on her own terms, told people in her network she was done serving food to a family that didn't see her as a person. 3 women, 3 stories, 3 variations of the same method: use, silence, discard. And I was next in line. Dr. Hargrove operated a specific way. I came to understand it over time. He was rarely rude in an obvious way. He was indifferent. He was the kind of person who treated staff like extensions of the property. When a fixture is in place, it's invisible. When it's inconvenient, you call someone to remove it. He never learned my name consistently, referred to me as the manager when he needed to mention me to guests. Once, in front of a fellow physician who was dining with them, he gestured toward me and said, "She handles the household for us. No name, no title, no acknowledgement." Diana was different. She knew my name. She used it when she wanted to give me an order, and when she wanted to remind me I was being watched. Her control was more personal, more surgical. She noticed when I was tired and chose that moment to add more to my plate. She noticed when I'd done something well and deliberately said nothing. Never a thank you, never a good job, just silence. And when I made a small mistake, she mentioned it in front of whoever was nearby. Vanessa forgot to use the linen napkins tonight, as if forgetting a napkin was a character flaw. I mapped the power structure of that household. He controlled everything that involved money. She controlled everything that involved people. And the people who depended on them weren't people in that map. They were inventory. The ones who serve learn to be invisible. And invisible people hear everything. I heard conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. On the upper-level terrace one evening, while I was passing around appetizers, Dr. Hargrove and a man I didn't recognize, expensive suit, silver hair, old money posture, were discussing billing with an unsettling casualness. The insurer's going to hold payment 90 days. Then we bill the patient directly in the meantime. What about what's reported? Reported stays what it is. It's the unreported that matters. I set down the appetizer plate, went back to the kitchen, filed that away in the mental drawer where I was storing a lot of things. What made me turn that drawer into action was a Tuesday afternoon, about 2 months into the job. I was organizing Dr. Hargrove's home office, a task Diana had given me with the explicit instruction to not touch the papers, just organize the space. I vacuumed, dusted the bookshelves, arranged the desk accessories. When I went to dust the side drawer of the desk, it slid too far and opened completely. Inside was a small black flash drive. Plain looking, nothing special. I went to close the drawer, my hand knocked it, and it fell to the floor. I picked it up, went to put it back, but something, I can't fully explain what, maybe instinct, maybe months of small things that had left me far more alert than I used to be, made me look at it for a few seconds longer than I needed to. I put it in my apron pocket, just for that afternoon. That night, after Dr. Hargrove left for the hospital and Diana went to dinner with friends in Virginia Highland, I took out my laptop, the older one I'd bought secondhand in Macon, and opened the flash drive. I didn't understand everything immediately. There were spreadsheets, lots of spreadsheets, patient names, procedure codes, insurance carrier names, amounts billed, dates. What caught my eye was a column that repeated across nearly every entry: billed to insurer and billed to patient. In almost every row, both columns were filled. The same procedure billed twice, once to the insurance company, once directly to the patient. I wasn't an accountant, I wasn't a lawyer, but I'd worked in an office for years. I knew enough to understand that billing twice for the same procedure was not standard practice. And at the back of my mind, the terrace conversation came back clearly. It's the unreported that matters. I did something I had never done in a job before. I photographed every single spreadsheet with my phone, methodical, page by page. My hands were steady. Then I put the flash drive back in the drawer exactly as I'd found it. I went to sleep that night with a different weight in my chest. Not fear, awareness. Something I didn't have a name for yet, but that I would understand later was the beginning of everything. The termination came on a Monday morning, about a month after the gala. It wasn't because of the flash drive, I'm certain of that. It was more banal than that. It was because I followed up on a paycheck that was 7 days late. 7 days. I sent a message through the work phone at 9 in the morning asking if there was an issue with my payment. Diana called me at 10. "Vanessa, I think it might be time for us to part ways." Just like that. No explanation. No stated reason. In the smooth, firm voice of a woman who treats every difficult decision like a routine task. "Can you tell me why? I just feel like you're not quite the right fit for what we need anymore. Are you letting me go because I asked about my late paycheck?" 2 seconds of silence. "We'll make sure everything's handled properly." Don't worry, everything handled properly. I knew exactly what that meant coming from an employer who didn't want to pay what they owed. I packed my things that afternoon. Don, the family's driver, a man in his mid-50s with gray at his temples who'd been with the Hargroves for 6 years and treated me with more basic dignity than any member of that family ever had, helped me carry my bag to the elevator. At the elevator doors, he lowered his voice. "You're going to be just fine. You're sharp, but be careful with what you know." I looked at him. "Do you know something, Don?" He glanced both ways, then looked at me. "I know a lot of things. 6 years driving that car, I heard a lot of conversations from the back seat that weren't meant for me." Pause. "When you need me, you call." And he let the elevator doors close. The first month after the termination was the hardest of my adult life. It wasn't just the money, though the money was real and urgent. It was the inside of my head. It was Diana's voice playing back on a loop telling me I wasn't the right fit. It was Dr. Hargrove's magazine cover smile in front of 200 people telling me women like me didn't come upstairs. It was waking up at 3 in the morning feeling like something was fundamentally wrong with me. Like I'd done something wrong. Like if I'd been more quiet, more patient, more invisible, I would have lasted longer. I looked for work in Buckhead, 2 families asked for references. I gave them the family from before. I had the letter, but when the Hargrove name came up, one family simply never called back. I found out later, through the informal network of household workers that moves invisibly through that zip code, that Diana had told someone in their circle that I was not someone who respects the privacy of the household. One sentence, no specifics, no proof. The sentence was enough. I went 3 weeks without a position. My savings dropped below $1,000. I was behind on rent at the house in East Atlanta. My mother called twice, asking if everything was okay, and I said yes, it wasn't. One night, lying on that mattress in the small room, I made the calculation I didn't want to make. How much did they actually owe me? Unpaid overtime accumulated across 22 months, the employer's share of payroll taxes that hadn't been handled correctly, my accrued paid time off that was never paid out at termination, the difference between my job description and my actual scope of work, a discrepancy that pointed to misclassification issues. These were my rights. I knew they were my rights because my friend Keisha, who'd been in Atlanta 4 years before me and worked as a legal administrative assistant at an employment law firm in Midtown, had told me when I first started with the Hargroves, "Save everything, Vanessa, pay stubs, texts, receipts, everything." I had saved everything. I met Keisha at the coffee shop near her office on a Thursday afternoon. She came out during her lunch break. I brought a folder with everything I had: pay stubs, direct deposit confirmations, timesheet photos. I'd photographed my timesheets every single month because something about the way that household operated told me I'd need them one day. Texts from the work phone, emails with vendors that documented my actual scope of work. Keisha put on her reading glasses and went through the whole folder on the coffee shop table. She was quiet for about 15 minutes, turning page after page. "Vanessa, what? You didn't lose a job." She took off her glasses and looked at me. "You got out of a trap." I tried to laugh. Couldn't quite get there. "And you're owed a lot more than you think. 22 months of uncompensated overtime, with management responsibilities that weren't in your job description or pay grade." She tapped the folder. "This is a solid wage claim, potentially a very significant one. I've never done anything like that." "You haven't. But the attorney I work for takes cases like this. First consultation's free. Tomorrow morning? Tomorrow morning." And that was when something shifted inside me. Not all at once. Gradually, the way your eyes adjust when you've been in the dark a long time and you start to make out the shapes of things. I started remembering what I was carrying, the photos of the spreadsheets, what Dawn had said at the elevator, the flash drive. I had seen something in that house, and I still remembered every detail. Attorney Denise Park had her office in Midtown, not far from Peachtree Street. Small office, 2 potted succulents, stacks of case files bound in blue and gray. Early 40s, natural hair pulled back, reading glasses on a beaded chain, and the quality of attention that belongs to someone who has heard hundreds of stories like mine and hasn't stopped being genuinely angry about any of them. I went with Keisha on a Friday at 9 in the morning, with the folder of documents and a photo album on my phone I hadn't shown anyone. She listened for 40 minutes without interrupting, then spent 20 minutes going through the documents, then sat with her pen tapping slowly against the legal pad. "Your wage claims are solid," she said. "With what you have here, we're in strong territory. 22 months of uncompensated overtime, job duties inconsistent with your classification, termination within days of raising a compensation concern. That last piece has retaliation written all over it. How much are we talking? I need to run the full calculations. But conservatively, we could be looking at $60,000, $70,000 or more, depending on what a court or the Department of Labor determines." I breathed. "There's something else," I said, and I showed her the spreadsheet photos. Attorney Park looked at the photos in silence, asked me to send them to her email, then spent about 3 minutes looking at her screen without speaking. "Where did you get these?" "His home office. They fell out of a drawer." I photographed what I saw. "Do you know what these spreadsheets represent?" "Double billing. Same procedure, billed to the insurance company and then billed again directly to the patient." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't categorize in the moment. Then she categorized it herself. "Vanessa, if this is what it appears to be, we are looking at insurance fraud. Potentially federal insurance fraud, depending on which carriers are involved. That is not an employment matter. That is a criminal matter, and you were an eyewitness to the existence of these documents." We looked at each other. What do I do with this? For now, nothing. For now, we focus on your wage claims, but keep that material somewhere extremely safe. Multiple copies, different locations. I left that office a different person than I'd walked in. I wasn't just a terminated employee with legitimate grievance. I was a witness. I was a creditor. I was someone who knew things that very powerful people did not want known. The family that had treated me like nobody had been far too careless around someone they considered invisible. The irony was something I held on to. They thought I saw nothing, but I had seen everything. Over the next 3 weeks, I became someone I hadn't been before. Not on the outside. On the outside, I was still the Vanessa from East Atlanta Village, with the small room and the cracked phone screen and the shrinking bank account. But on the inside, I was turning into something else. Colder, more methodical, more certain. Attorney Park filed the formal demand letter. Legal language, detailed, addressed to Dr. Marcus Hargrove and Diana Hargrove, itemizing every unpaid hour, every classification issue, every procedural violation across 22 months. Their response came 4 days later, through their attorney, a firm in Midtown with an intimidating letterhead, with the following offer: $10,000, in exchange for a signed release of all claims, including a non-disclosure agreement. $10,000 for me to sign a document saying I had nothing to complain about, and that I could never discuss anything related to the family. I called Attorney Park the moment I read it. What do I do? What do you want to do? 2 seconds of silence. I want what's mine, not what they think buys my silence. Then the answer is no. The answer is no. We sent the no through their attorney, in writing, formally. That same week I called Don. He picked up on the second ring, like he'd been expecting it. Vanessa. Don, you said when I needed you, I should call. I did. I need you. Short pause. Then, when can you meet? We met at a coffee shop in Decatur, a Tuesday afternoon. He came with a paper bag and the air of someone who'd thought carefully before deciding to do what he was doing. He sat across from me at a corner table, ordered a coffee, and looked at the table for a moment before he spoke. I have something to show you, he said. He took a phone out of the bag, older model, smaller screen. The night of the gala, when he said what he said to you in front of everyone, he set the phone on the table between us. I was in the service hallway on the lower level. I could see the security monitor they have down there. I started recording the screen with my personal phone. I looked at him. You recorded it? I recorded it. Didn't know if I'd ever use it, but it didn't seem right to let that moment pass without some kind of record. You were treated that way in front of 200 people at an event you organized yourself. I thought someday it might matter. He sent me the video right there at the table. I watched it on his phone. The quality wasn't perfect. It was a security monitor screen filmed with a phone camera, but it was clear enough. You could see Dr. Hargrove at the top of the staircase. You could hear the sentence. You could see the 3 men around him, and you could see the faces of those 3 men when he said it. I looked 2 of them up afterward. One was a Georgia state senator from the Buckhead district. The other was the administrator of a regional hospital network that held contracts with 2 of the major insurance carriers that appeared in Dr. Hargrove's spreadsheets. I handed Don his phone back, stared at my coffee for 30 seconds. Why are you still there, Don? After everything you've seen. He blew on his coffee before he answered. Got 11 years to my pension? 2 grandkids I help with. I do my job. They pay my check. What happens upstairs isn't my business as long as it doesn't touch me. Pause. But what they did to you touched me, and I can't sit with that. We left that coffee shop with the video copied to my phone, and an agreement. He would testify as a witness in the labor proceedings, if it came to that. I drove back to East Atlanta thinking about the senator, about the hospital administrator, about the insurance contracts, about the spreadsheets, about the double billing. When you pull one thread, I said quietly to myself on that drive, the whole thing starts to unravel. 2 days after meeting Dawn, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. My name is Dr. Patricia Wynn. I'm a physician. I used to be associated with Marcus Hargrove. I think we need to talk. Can we meet in person? I stared at the message for 10 minutes. Could be a setup. Could be their attorneys trying a different approach. But it could be the thread I needed. I replied, yes. When? She chose a quiet place. A small cafe in Inman Park. The kind without a sign you'd notice from the street. That neighborhood regulars know, and everyone else walks past. She was there before me, already seated at a back table, water in front of her, a closed folder on the table. Dr. Patricia Wynne was around 47, black woman, silver locks pinned back, charcoal blazer, the focused expression of someone trained to speak precisely and not waste a word. "How did you find me?" I asked before I even sat down. An employment attorney in Midtown mentioned that a former employee of the Hargroves had initiated a wage claim and had potentially relevant information about the practice. No name, just the context. She met my eyes directly. I did the rest. "And what's your connection to them?" "I was a minority partner in Hargrove Cardiology Associates for 3 years. Pause. "I left 8 months ago. I left because I raised concerns about the billing practices with Marcus directly, and he told me, in plain language, that I had 2 options: stay quiet or exit before things got difficult for me." We looked at each other. The server brought water without being asked. I thanked her without looking away from Dr. Wynne. "What kind of billing practices?" "Dual billing. Same procedure submitted to insurance and then billed directly to the patient. In some cases, procedures billed to insurance that were never performed." She opened the folder. I kept internal records before I left. I don't know if they're sufficient alone for an investigation, but combined with what you have, how do you know what I have? I don't know exactly, but I know what existed in that home office, and if you were in that household for nearly 2 years, you probably saw something you weren't supposed to. I stopped, studied her face, looked for any sign that this was a test, that it was an orchestrated conversation set up by their legal team. I found nothing like that. What I found was exhaustion, the same exhaustion I'd seen in Rhonda, but underneath it, a layer of determination that Rhonda hadn't been able to hold on to. "Why now?" I asked. "You've been gone 8 months. You have this information. Why did you wait until a former housekeeper filed a claim to move?" She was quiet for a moment, then said evenly, "Because I was afraid. And because I needed someone who also had something at stake, so that if I moved and failed, I wasn't standing alone." Pause. A terminated employee with a pending wage claim and documented evidence isn't the person they were expecting. It changes the calculation entirely. I understood. She wasn't rescuing me. She was calculating. In my situation, calculation was more reliable than goodwill. I put my phone on the table and opened the spreadsheet photos. She looked at each one carefully, scrolled slowly, once, then again. Then she closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them and said, "That's the master file. He kept it in the home office because he considered it safer than the practice location, less accessible to the other partners." She placed her hand on the folder. "Vanessa, what you and I have together is sufficient to file formal complaints with the FBI's healthcare fraud unit and with the insurance carriers directly. This goes far beyond employment law. I know. Are you willing to go down this road? It won't be easy. Their legal team is aggressive. They will try to discredit you. They will say you stole those documents. They will use everything they can." I breathed slowly, thought about the gala, about the magazine cover smile, about the casual sentence delivered like it was self-evident, about Rhonda who swallowed it because she needed the reference, about Jasmine who spent 7 months on credit cards because of a whispered phrase, about Monica and the $1,200 she paid out of her own pocket. "What they've already done to me is the worst version of what they can do," I said. "They've already treated me like I don't exist. They've already spread lies about me. They've already tried to buy me for $10,000. Pause. I have nothing left to lose with them, only to gain." Dr. Wynne did something rare. She smiled in a way that wasn't politeness, it was recognition. "Then we work together." And that was how my most unlikely ally, and my most decisive one, sat down on the same side of the table as me. What came in the weeks that followed was an operation I never imagined I'd be capable of coordinating. But remember what I told you. I've always had a talent for organizing, for getting things into the right place. This was the biggest event I ever planned in my life, and this time it was for me. Attorney Park filed the formal wage complaint with the Georgia Department of Labor and initiated civil proceedings simultaneously. At the same time, Dr. Wynne and I brought the documents to a healthcare attorney she trusted, an attorney who specialized in insurance fraud cases. He reviewed the material and confirmed there was a solid basis for formal complaints to the FBI's healthcare fraud division and to the affected insurance carriers. The Hargroves attorney reached out again. This time the offer was $50,000, still with the non-disclosure agreement attached. I, Attorney Park, and the healthcare attorney met on a Wednesday afternoon. I said no. They understood without needing any further explanation. Dawn's video was preserved as evidence and formally submitted to the proceedings. Then came the day of the partners' meeting. The practice had a scheduled quarterly partners' meeting, a meeting that Dr. Wynne still had the right to request participation in as a former partner, because there were unresolved items from her exit agreement. She exercised that right, confirmed attendance formally, and she brought me as her documentation assistant. I dressed in black slacks, a white blouse, and a gray blazer Keisha lent me. I pulled my hair back. I picked up the folder with documents organized in chronological order. I learned from Diana that organization is everything. We arrived at the building where the practice maintained its offices in Buckhead at 2 in the afternoon, 12th floor, a conference room with an oval table, leather chairs, windows framing the Atlanta skyline. Dr. Marcus Hargrove was seated at the head of the table when we walked in. He saw me, processed. The expression on his face was like watching someone try to solve an equation that doesn't work. Confusion, then recognition, then something that for the first time in all the time I had known him looked like genuine discomfort. "What is she doing here?" he said, looking at Dr. Wynne. "She's my documentation assistant for this meeting." "That's not. My exit agreement specifies that I retain the right to advisory presence at partner meetings while outstanding items remain unresolved. Section 3, Paragraph 2. Dr. Wynne opened the contract on the table. "Shall I continue?" The 3 other partners present exchanged glances. One of them, Dr. Gerald Ashford, whom I recognized from the gala, nodded. We sat down. Dr. Wynne began in a calm, methodical voice. She placed the documents in the center of the table, explained what they were, explained where they came from, explained what they proved. I stayed to the side, organizing and passing documents as she spoke. But at a certain moment, Dr. Hargrove stood up, slapped the table with his palm, and pointed his finger at me. "You have no right to be in this room with those documents. You stole them." I stood up slowly. I didn't need momentum. The momentum had been stored for a long time. "I didn't steal anything, Dr. Hargrove. Those documents fell out of your drawer in front of me. I photographed what I saw. An eyewitness has the right to document what they witness. You were my employee. Everything you saw in that house was a crime?" I let the word sit for 2 seconds. "Would you like to finish that sentence?" Silence in the room. Dr. Ashford put on his glasses and looked at the spreadsheets, then looked at Dr. Hargrove. "Marcus, is this real? This is a manipulation of—" "Marcus!" Dr. Ashford's voice dropped lower and colder. "Is this real?" Dr. Hargrove said nothing. I picked up another folder and set it on the table. "This is the wage complaint currently in process against you and Diana Hargrove. 22 months of uncompensated overtime, misclassification of employment duties, termination with characteristics of direct retaliation, all documented." Pause. "I also have accounts from 3 other household workers who experienced the same treatment and are prepared to provide statements. You can't. You have spent your entire career being called doctor. I spent mine being called the help. But today, in this room, I'm the one with the questions, and you're the one who has to answer them." The silence that followed was the kind that doesn't need any more words. Dr. Hargrove looked at me, not with the magazine cover smile anymore, with something else, something I recognized as the face of a man who has spent decades building a wall and is watching the first stone being removed. Dr. Ashford took off his glasses. "Marcus, I think we need to have a conversation without guests present." That was my signal. I stood, straightened the documents, and put them back in the folder. I gave Dr. Hargrove one last look. Money does not give anyone the right to humiliate, and not having money does not obligate anyone to accept humiliation. And I walked out of that room with my head up. I left that meeting with my heart racing, but this time it wasn't fear, it was certainty. The wage case was resolved 5 months later. The findings included uncompensated overtime, employment misclassification, retaliatory termination, and damages for emotional harm. The total settlement came to $74,000. Attorney Park received her fees. I received the rest, $74,000. I repeat that number not because it's the most important thing in this story, but because for a long time, I doubted a number like that could ever have my name next to it. Dawn's video was never publicly released, but it was formally submitted as evidence in the proceedings. The Hargroves' attorney challenged its admissibility. The finding was that a bystander's recording of an interaction in a shared social space during an event the claimant was working does not constitute a privacy violation. The evidence was valid. My story was valid. The complaints to the FBI's healthcare fraud division and to the insurance carriers were filed formally by Dr. Wynne, with support from the healthcare attorney. A federal investigation was opened. 2 of the major carriers suspended their contracts with the practice pending the outcome. The other partners voted to remove Dr. Hargrove from the managing partnership, not out of principle, I understand that clearly, but out of self-preservation. Nobody wants to go down with someone under federal investigation. I heard he still has his medical license, still sees patients, but the life before, the galas, the magazine profiles, the dinners with state senators, the charity foundation with his name attached, got quieter. The kind of quiet that happens when people in your circle start exchanging looks before they include you. Diana filed for divorce. I don't know if it was the investigation or reasons I don't have access to. I found out through a mutual acquaintance, not through searching. I stopped searching a long time ago. Don retired 11 months after everything concluded. He sent me a text on a Tuesday morning. Vanessa, today was my last day. 40 years behind the wheel. Thank you for giving me the courage to do the right thing. I sent back congratulations and a heart emoji he probably didn't know what to do with. Rhonda went back to the employment market as a properly classified household employee with a written contract. She told me later that she finally understood she'd been owed back pay for 2 years of misclassified work, and she found an attorney who helped her pursue it. Jasmine got a position with a family in Virginia Highland that treats her well. She sent me a message when she heard about the case just to say thank you. I told her it wasn't for me, it was for her, it was for all of us. Dr. Ashford, the partner who was the first to turn and ask whether what was on the table was real, sent me a message 3 weeks after the meeting. It said, I did what I should have done long before this. I'm sorry it took this long. I didn't reply. Not out of anger, out of genuine indifference. He did the right thing when it was convenient for him. I didn't need anything more from him. Today I wake up at 6 in the morning in my own apartment. It's small, a 1-bedroom in Decatur, 11th floor of a building that doesn't have a penthouse or a privileged view. But the windows are mine. The coffee is mine. The stove is mine. The silence of the morning is mine. 18 months ago, I opened Vanessa Robinson Events. Started small, birthday parties and baby showers in my neighborhood, full coordination and styling at a fair price. Then came weddings. Then a financial services company in Midtown that needed someone to run their annual client appreciation event. Then another company. Today I have 2 ongoing corporate contracts and a wait list for private events. This week I hired my first employee. Written contract, salary paid on schedule, health benefits, paid time off, overtime calculated and compensated. I worked through the paperwork with my attorney because when you learn what it feels like to be treated as invisible, you also learn how to make sure no one on your team ever has to feel that. The event management certificate, I finished it. Evening program, 2 years, while the case was moving and the business was starting. I completed it last month. At the ceremony, my mother was standing beside me. Her kidneys are stable now, the treatment has been working. She drove up from Macon with her overnight bag and a church dress she'd been saving for a special occasion. The occasion was me. I heard through someone who knows someone that Dr. Hargrove still lives in the same building on West Paces Ferry Road, on the 14th floor, with both levels and the view of the city. But I don't live in anyone's shadow anymore. Before I let you go, I need to tell you something I wish I had known much earlier. Something Rhonda didn't know, something Jasmine didn't know. Something I only discovered when I was already at the bottom. Household workers have rights, real rights protected by law that many employers would prefer you never learn about. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, domestic workers are generally entitled to federal minimum wage and overtime pay for hours worked beyond 40 in a work week, at a rate of 1.5 times the regular pay. Many states have additional protections that go further than the federal baseline. If you are regularly working in the same home, on a consistent schedule, under the direction of the employer, you are very likely an employee under the law, not an independent contractor, regardless of how your employer describes the arrangement. Misclassification. When an employer calls you an independent contractor to avoid paying taxes, benefits, and overtime, is illegal. If you have been misclassified, you may be owed back pay, back taxes that should have been covered by your employer, and other compensation. An employment attorney can help you calculate what you're actually owed. Workers' compensation protections apply to household workers in most states. If you are injured on the job, your employer may be required by law to carry workers' compensation insurance that covers your medical treatment and lost wages. Paying out of pocket for a workplace injury while your employer does nothing about it is not something you are required to accept. Retaliation is illegal. If your employer fires you, demotes you, or takes any negative action against you because you complained about unpaid wages, unsafe conditions, or discrimination, that is retaliation, and it is a separate legal violation on top of the original one. How to document everything. Keep every pay stub, every text message related to work, every email. Screenshot your messages regularly and back them up somewhere your employer cannot access. If you are humiliated or mistreated in front of witnesses, write down the date, what was said, and the names of anyone who was present. That documentation becomes evidence. Where to get help? Your state's Department of Labor is the first place to contact. You can find it with a quick search online, and most have a wage claim division that handles domestic worker complaints. The National Domestic Workers Alliance is a national organization that can connect you with local resources and legal support. Many areas have legal aid organizations that offer free employment law consultations to workers who cannot afford an attorney. The Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division accepts complaints online and investigates wage theft. You do not need an attorney to file an initial complaint. If someone uses their money as an excuse to treat you as less than you are, that is not authority, that is abuse. And abuse has a name, has a law, and has consequences. If I had known all of this earlier, I would have acted so much sooner. That's why I'm telling you now. Thank you for staying with me this far, for listening to this story from beginning to end. I know it was long, and I know it was worth it. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever been treated like you weren't enough, like your work didn't deserve respect, like your place was always somewhere below, then share this video. Share it with a friend, a cousin, a co-worker who is enduring what she shouldn't have to endure. Sometimes the story someone needed to hear doesn't arrive by accident. It arrives because somebody sent it. Subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories like this one. Stories of women who were treated as invisible and discovered that being invisible is sometimes the greatest power you have. And tell me in the comments, if you found out tomorrow that you had been underpaid or misclassified at a job, what would you do? Tell me. This conversation matters. I'm Vanessa, and today, finally, that name takes up the space it always deserved. Thank you for giving me your time. Stories like mine exist to remind you that no one, with however much money they have, has the right to make you feel less.